You see, divorce in the Old Testament could only be initiated by the husband. And the woman had no say-so in it. But here was another practice. It says that he raised to write her a certificate of divorce. Why is that? Because there was this practice of just putting a woman outside of the house without giving her a certificate. And the practice involved basically saying, you know what? Or quite frankly, whatever it is, you know what? They could get divorced because he didn't like her cooking anymore. She put too much salt in the food. He could have divorced her for any reason. He could have divorced her because he found someone younger and he thought she was more attractive. And God said he hates divorce in the book of Malachi. There's two Hebrew words here, and one talks about specifically divorce, a bill of divorcement, and one talks about the word, it's called send away, to put away. Shalach is the Hebrew word. And the Bible uses these interchangeably. And some think that there was this practice of actually where some guys would put their wives out and not give her a certificate of divorce so that the divorce was not legal. And therefore, if she ever did go and marry someone else, it would be adultery because it had not been legally taken care of by the paperwork of giving her a certificate of divorce. And therefore, she'd probably have to go into prostitution to be able to support herself and be abandoned from her kids. Now, when you get to the Greek in the New Testament, there's actually only one word for it. It's the same word, so we don't know if that was a practice that Jesus was dealing with or not, for sure. But realize that when the Bible deals with this, it's not endorsing it, but God is trying to regulate this. I think the point's been made. So, back in Mark, and that matter of fact, back in Deuteronomy, he deals with this uncleanness or indecency. And it's not clear as to exactly what that is, but it's most likely not adultery. Some think it is. I disagree because the punishment for adultery was death. And if a wife or a husband committed adultery, the law provided for them to come brought before the people and to be stoned to death. And not to write them a certificate of divorce. So the uncleanness or the indecency is not, in my opinion, not likely adultery. Now, in Jesus' day, you had two schools of thought on divorce, kind of like you do today. You had a more conservative view on divorce. It said you cannot divorce ever any reason except for adultery. That's the only reason. And that was led by a rabbi by the name of Shimei, and he was the more conservative. And then you had another school of thought that was represented by Rabbi Hillel, and he was more liberal. And he said, you know what? You can divorce your wife for whatever reason. And guess who had more followers? Hillel. Because it's a little easier to have that, to follow the teachings of Hillel now, isn't it? So these guys are coming to Jesus, and they're quoting the Old Testament. And so Jesus asks them, what does Moses say about it? And they give him one verse. They give him 4 verses, right? They give him that section. And Jesus' response in verse 5 is that he says, because of the hardness of your heart, Moses wrote this precept. Jesus deals with what they're talking about. He deals with it. And he says, Moses wrote this because of the hardness of your heart, because the hardness of the human heart compromises the indivisibility of marriage. Isn't that why we compromise when we're talking about divorce? We are compromising our views that marriage is something to be permanent. I know that I stood at the altar, and I know, or before the judge, wherever he did it, and I know that I said that, that I promised to love you and to cherish you, to have and to hold so long as death do us part. I know I promised that I would do it in sickness and health, and I know I promised that I would do it for better, for worse, and man, this is getting deep. But it's really bad. I didn't know it was going to be this bad. And you know what? Quite frankly, you've been on a downhill slide in my mind from bad to worse to worse to worse. Is there another word beyond worse? Because I think that's where you slid. And my heart, quite frankly, is becoming hardened towards you, and I don't feel in love anymore. When does feeling in love become a condition of biblical marriage? It's not a condition of biblical marriage. The in-love feeling has nothing to do with biblical marriage. Because quite frankly, you're going to fall out of love. You're going to have bad moods, and you might put up with it for a while, but it's not about the feelings. It's about obeying God. And it's the hardness of the human heart that compromises these principles, don't we? Your heart's been hard, hasn't it? So is mine. Now, I'm not a divorced man. I've been married to the same woman for 17 years, and I'm not bragging because I know some of you haven't done that. I'm only saying that to make a point that, man, there's no marriage that's perfect, and it's hard work. It's hard work. I was just reminded of Ravi Zacharias, one of my favorite teachers and preachers, said that when he was in seminary that one of his professors was talking about marriage being hard work, and he leaned over and whispered to his friends, well, I'm not sure I'd want to be married to anyone that thought it was real hard work to be married to me. And the professor asked him, what did you say? And Ravi spoke out and he said, I'm not sure I'd want to be married to anyone that thought it was hard work to be married to me. And the professor said, Ravi, how long have you been married? He said, I am not, sir. And he said, well, then shut up. You know nothing about marriage. Because marriage is hard work. And our hearts become hard and we compromise. Things that we said we promised we would do. I mean, it's funny because as I was studying this week, I honestly, guys, I didn't expect this to happen. But as I studied this topic this week, I found my heart being warmed towards my spouse. Interesting. I just found it interesting. Just studying the Bible about biblical marriage, my heart began to be warmed there. I'm just telling you my personal experience there on that. But I find that because we make these commitments, and then when we feel we can't keep them, we feel that, we can dissolve it. And you realize that's because of your own sinful heart, but it's also your culture around you encourages you to do that, right? Anybody get on Facebook and spend 24 hours and you'll find plenty of encouragement that direction, won't you? It is the nature of the human heart to seek justification for its actions. You know what the top 10 reasons why people get divorced are? And I found a number of different lists too, by the way. Here's one list that was actually on ehow.com. Ehow. Number 1 on their list was infidelity. Adult infidelity. Number 2 was abuse. Number 3 was incompatibility. Number 4 was bored. I'm bored. I am so glad that my wife could have divorced me a long time ago if that's the reason she was going to use, because I can be boring sometimes, I think. I'm bored. Number 5 was a lack of communication. Well, hello. I'm sure the guy said, I don't got nothing more to talk about, and she wants to talk. Number 6 was children. Number 7 on their list was expectations. Number 8 was mental health, or maybe perceived mental health, huh? You're crazy. Number 9 was money, and number 10 was addiction. Of course, in pastoral counseling, I always hear that financial reasons are the number cause of divorce. And usually it's a mix. It's a mix, isn't it? Has your heart gotten hard because of all kinds of things that are happening? Is your heart hard here today? Rather than go and deal with the divorce issue, Jesus is going to take us to talk about marriage. You see, because that's part of the issue, is that when we get mad at each other in the home, oh boy, do we want to bring out the divorce term, don't we? Boy, can we be quick to say, what, you want to divorce me? Trying to put it on them. You're trying to make them say, what, you want to divorce me because you really want the divorce? Or you just want to hurt them?